I was lucky with.
Oh yeah, she's a planner. Hello everyone, and welcome to the June 10th, 2025 meeting of the City of Westminster Planning Commission. I hereby call this meeting to order, and will the secretary please call roll?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Tomacek.
Present.
Commissioner Calling.
Here.
Chairperson Boschert.
Here.
Vice Chair Carpenter.
Here.
Commissioner Zhang.
Here.
Commissioner Pegg.
Here.
Mr. Chairperson, we have 5 regular and 1 alternate for tonight's meeting. Mr. Mayo and Mr. Dunn, and who am I missing? Anyone?
Kinnear, first alternate.
Kinnear, first alternate are all absent, I believe excused. Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting is a little different than usual. This is a workshop. Instead of considering land use cases and holding public hearings, tonight's will be an informal workshop to receive a presentation and share ideas on the proposed Unified Development Code. Tonight's topic is site and structure standards. If time allows, we will allow the audience members to speak after the commission and staff have had a chance to make discussion. And who's presenting tonight? Is it Andrew?
Yes,
Principal planner.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Commissioners, for letting us be here. With Chair's permission, I'll go and get started.
Please do.
Okay. So thank you for having us back here. We were here a month ago, and so this is the second of the 3 planned workshops to talk about our Unified Development Code and the different pieces that are going into that. As you already stated, tonight's topic is site and structure standards, or more generally, just the kind of things you would think about as you're planning a site and a building for a site. We focused on zoning and uses last month, and next month we're going to focus a little more on procedures. So you'll have that to look forward to. I'm joined again by Elizabeth Garvin, our fantastic consultant from Clarion and Associates, and she's been really good to us and very patient with us as we've tried to get the Westy Way figured out with this project. Just like last time, I'll probably do the first part of the presentation, and then Elizabeth will do the second part, and then we'll have a little activity for some interactive discussion after the presentation. And some of this we showed last time, but for the benefit of those in the audience that weren't here, this is a lengthy process. We've been working on this for a little while. We're really in the sausage making now of what goes into the draft and what needs to be included, and input from you and the public on things maybe we hadn't thought of, or things that need to be adjusted so they're appropriate to Westminster. When we get a more finalized draft, we'll be back to you, and we'll be resume our city council briefings, and then when that's more polished up, get ready for adoption there. Westminster Municipal Code Title 11 is a pretty big volume, or even tome might be the right word. It does a lot of things. Our work is focused on the things you see in the yellow or orange here on the screen, and it's really the land development related stuff, the zoning, planning, how you place things on a site, and our procedures for development. Our building codes were updated last year, and some of the other individual chapters within the title have been updated through the years. But basically, the reason it's called a Unified Development Code is that it seeks to unify different parts of our regulatory system. We basically have 8 different regulatory documents we work with now. The actual code, which includes these things on this table of contents, as well as 7 different design standards, design guidelines documents. Some of those have been updated more recently than others, and they've not always been consistent. So really harmonizing all that together into a one-stop shop is what we're trying to achieve through the Unified Development Code. We showed this last time, but we have master plans. We have a comprehensive plan. We have a sustainability plan, transportation mobility plan, water supply plan, park plan, et cetera. So the City Council has set policy for the city. This is really about what are those regulations, those technical provisions to put code language to implement the policy that's been set for the city. And then also just a reminder, this is a citywide project. It's really not geographic specific. It includes standards and regulations. We'll be looking at procedures, which, like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that next month. The downtown and Westminster Station specific plans will continue to be their own sort of individual regulatory schemes. Really, this would apply to vacant land, which is about 2.3% of the city, about 475 acres. But it would also be used where we anticipate redevelopment. So as infill comes in, perhaps a commercial center adds a new building or something like that, or something gets torn down and replaced, the code would come into a play for that. The UDC, we're striving to create the right type of regulations to allow different types of development. That does not mean they actually get built. That's a whole separate conversation to make sure something actually gets built. But this is providing the rules of the road to actually get built. This is where we're going to trade off. Okay, I could actually read to this, but I'll let you.
Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Chair and Planning Commission members, thanks for spending your time with us this evening. So, jumping into the changes, this will be a lot like the conversation we had last time. This kind of big picture overview, so to orient everybody before we get the regulations in front of you. So, in this round of standards, we are looking at what is working in the city and what do we need to do to refine that, to make sure that it's clear for applicants, it's clear for staff at the front desk, and that it reflects, like Andrew said, the Westy way of doing things. So as we go through, and when you see the regulations, you'll see a lot of the basic concepts are carried forward from the current design and development regulations. So about 3 slides earlier, Andrew showed that we have all different kinds of senior housing standards and there it is, multifamily residential design standards, retail commercial design guidelines. We've been working with staff to pull all of the relevant regulations from those multiple documents into the code. So it's all in one place, everyone can find it. And then as we do that, to start asking, how does this apply to new development? How does it apply to redevelopment? How does it apply in an urban setting? How does it apply in a more suburban setting? So we're kind of putting it in the right place and then drafting it at the right level. We have carried forward the city's use of standards, which are required, and guidelines, which are encouraged. Lots of communities do this, and it helps an applicant see not only what the city is looking for, but what they'd like to see. So it gives a very well-rounded picture of preferred design approaches. We've spent a lot of time together, first Mondays, now Wednesdays, going through lessons learned. And what we mean by that is that planning staff has been incredibly helpful in going through applications that have been through the city and looking at, okay, here we are, a few years down the road or many years down the road, what worked, what didn't work, and what should we say in the regulations to make sure that we're covering those places as we move forward. So that has been invaluable in helping us target the regulations to the things the city really wants to see. I touched on we have now, in some places, differentiation between urban and suburban areas, and that aligns with the comp plan. And then also these regulations look forward to what Andrew was pointing out, that infill and redevelopment, and then also the potential for adaptive reuse. And the city already has standards for adaptive reuse of historic areas and structures. We're looking at adaptive reuse more of commercial to residential, or other changes to an existing structure that take it out of its current uses. Thank you. Okay, so we have two big sets of standards to start with at the beginning. So we have site and infrastructure. If you want to orient yourself, we're looking down on a site. And so this is what happens as the city is reviewing a development for where structures go on the site, where parking goes on the site, looking at what is the layout, and it's more horizontal, it's not vertical. Next section is vertical, so this is on the ground. So what we've done is go through all of the standards, reviewing them for gaps. So where are we not seeing something the city wants to see? Updating outdated requirements and reflecting changes in development patterns. Development changes over time. So we want to make sure the city can get the development that it wants to see. We're clarifying design requirements for infill and redevelopment. It's a little trickier than new development because you may have something in place. And then we're organizing the standards to align with and implement the Westminster Comprehensive Plan. Thank you. So what's included in this section? General standards, generally applicable standards for site and infrastructure. So this is where we're talking about how do people move around the site? So it's street design and circulation, pedestrian and bike circulation and design, mid-block connections. It's primarily pedestrian movement still. And then bringing in some grading, open space requirements, and the all-important solid waste storage, particularly for larger developments. So this is applicable to residential and mixed use and commercial. Across the board, we have these standards really focused on how are we moving people around, and looking at both vehicular and bike pads. So we have active transportation and car transportation. And that's one of the things where we're talking about, is it urban or suburban? And if it's urban, how are we really thinking about the bike pad circulation and making sure people can walk to or bike to the things they want to get to? Then we have a section for residential site design and infrastructure. So this will be applicable to PDPs and major subdivisions. This is not as intricate or detailed as the mixed use and commercial. For the most part, for residential subdivision, there's a small section that encourages solar orientation of structures. So that's laying out structures so you can take advantage of passive solar more than anything else. It's something we can do in Colorado, and you guys can do particularly up here in Westminster. There are some standards for cottage court and small lot development. So these are both settings where you might see single-family detached structures on a smaller lot than you might normally see in a subdivision, and it's because they might be taking up an infill lot, so where something wasn't developed previously, or maybe a lot that's just funky that you can't really do a lot with. And so we're trying to have standards in there that say, okay, we recognize that this may be different than what else is going on in the district, and here's how you can go about that. There's standards for common open space and private spaces. So we want places where people can use it jointly, and then people have their own private space, so be that yards or balconies. And then particularly for single-family attached or multifamily development, we've got how do we work parking areas into the design. So we're trying to address the biggest aspects of the design and give applicants the regulations they need. Let's go ahead. Thank you. So then we move into the typically larger developments. Sometimes we can get, a small mixed use or commercial site. So again, we're still horizontal here. So this will be applicable to new development and infill and redevelopment. Here we have some placemaking standards. So this really links back to the comprehensive plan, and when we're thinking about how are we coming up with those places in the city where people want to be, where we are encouraging, that lively sort of, this is where the restaurants are going to be, or this is where shopping might be. We'd like people working here. It's kind of those core places that draw people in. And those don't happen magically. The city needs standards for that. So we put those into the regulations. We have pad site location and use standards in here. I believe that's carried forward from the current regulations. Talking again about public spaces and amenities, we don't just need that in residential development. We need it in mixed use and commercial also. We have transition standards in here. And so transitions are when we have a more potentially intense development that could be close to a less intense development. So you can think about if someone is putting something commercial in next to residential, how do we transition between those developments so they can be good neighbors? It's not impossible to put them next to each other, but we want to put some thought into what that space looks like between them. You'll see some specific standards for Main Street and office development. Not literally Main Street, but this is back to the placemaking. So where we have something that is being developed and it's like a more traditional Main Street, where we're going to have, multiple shop fronts and stores next to each other. And then there's incorporation of the public art requirement. So we're taking all of the regulations, bringing them together, and looking at what the outcome is going to be, what that development's going to be like. Thanks, Andrew. So now we move up. So now we're vertical. We're at structure and form standards. So again, we're looking through the city's current standards, and certainly this is a place where your planning staff and urban design staff have put a lot of thought into the design standards. And so the goal isn't to walk away from it, it's to take it to the next level. So we've been reviewing the current standards, again, for gaps and dated requirements and changes in development patterns and development style also. Here, we're looking at infill and redevelopment to see how it fits scale-wise and design-wise, and then aligning in with and implementing the comprehensive plan. So the wealth of information that the city already has, we're really taking it and moving it forward and making sure that what you've learned about it, we've made changes to and moved it forward. So let's do the next slide. Okay, so in the structure and form standards, this is where we get into building design and materials, building color, and roof materials. So we are really taking a close look at the structure here, making sure that it's going to fit the site, is going to fit with surrounding structures. These are some of the key aspects of how we understand how something fits. And so we are, clarifying what the basics are to ensure that as applications come in, they're going to meet that. And then as the city works through the review process and negotiates the development, you're starting from a solid baseline and then taking the development applications forward to meet what the city would like to see. Some stuff that we have going on in here, in residential in particular, you are going to see that we're kind of treading gently into what we call residential structure typologies. I'm not sure that could be more opaque if I tried. So we're going to have some standards around different residential structure types. It's not going to tell somebody how to design their house, but it is going to say, here are some basics for townhomes. Here are some basics for front-back duplex or top-bottom duplex or paired homes, where we have seen from the city's current experiences and also from best practices that we can put some standards in that are like, okay, if you're doing a paired home, here are some of the things we want to see this structure do on its site and as it relates to other structures. We're putting those basics in. That is, it's kind of straddling that line between more conventional regulations and form-based, form-oriented regulations. And we're trying to get it to a place where it links to placemaking, right? So where we're thinking about what the structures are doing and how people are using them, but we haven't gone to the place of saying you're going to need 4 windows across the first floor in the front. So we're kind of backing off from that. So we're balancing letting people design their residences with the fit in the community. So that'll be new as you see it, and we'll certainly look for your feedback on that. There'll be the normal residential design elements in there. Where do the entries go? How are the walls designed? Talk to us about your roof, and the always fun discussions about garage location and size. That is going to be in there. And then, I'm sorry, Andrew, then we have rolled forward the multi-unit and senior housing design standards. We know the city's had a focus on senior housing over the years, and certainly want to make sure that we keep that going and we have those standards in there for both of those types of development. Okay, and then lots of standards, lots of categories of standards for mixed use and commercial. And I would say just from experience, I think Westminster does a nice balance of explaining what the basics are, but not necessarily getting in and designing for applicants. So it's that here's what we want to see baseline, and then a conversation takes place about what's going on the site, what's going on with the development, how could this be made to fit. And so it's that combination of regulations and really well-educated staff that work in your situation. So all of this is going to be basically likely what you guys are used to seeing. So how are the buildings massed on the site? What's the architectural character? In mixed use and commercial, we do get to that level of detail of looking at walls and entrances, windows and doors. because it helps both with continuity of design and to not let you have that one building that everyone drives by and goes, I don't know what happened here, but it's not good. So it puts some of that on paper, and I think, if I were a sociology major, I'd probably do better at this, but it's like we have some human expectations about how we interact with the built environment, and so we want to get some of the basics in here. Materials, mechanicals, and then we have special standards in here for retail, hospitality, and mixed use and Main Street. So you'll see all that when it comes forward. We have some new standards for office, industrial, and flex developments. So flex is exactly what it says, can have some office, can have some industrial or storage going on in it, depends on who the user is. We aren't going deeply into this, but thinking about just the impact on the community and the surrounding neighborhood from this type of development. So the regulations will focus on the facade design, so primarily that wall that faces other uses, the materials that are used for this construction, and then where are loading docks located? Because that's the one thing, when we go back to good neighbors, loading docks don't necessarily make good neighbors. So we want to talk about where is that located in the development. So this is kind of a mix of horizontal and vertical for the office industrial flex, but it fills a gap that staff's identified, has been something that they've kind of put other regulations into previously. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop on adaptive reuse for a second. So this is new content, and this is where we bring the toolkit recommendations in. I mean, we bring those toolkit recommendations in, the redevelopment toolkit recommendations in a few places, and this is one of those places. We've put some eligibility requirements in the regulations, and where a project meets one of the first four or meets the fifth, the city is going to have some pretty good flexibility in terms of redeveloping the site that will help the applicant reduce costs and move through the system. But it won't necessarily impact the design in a negative way. Adaptive reuse, particularly when we're going from commercial and residential, the big challenge is not necessarily the design of the exterior of the structure. It's often the design of the interior of the structure. And then how do we work with changing parking requirements or mechanical system requirements. So we've been taking a close look at what is a smooth path to encourage redevelopment of existing structures. Just in terms of, why would we do this? This type of development is very green development. You'll have the least impact on the environment reusing an existing structure. We're not doing some of the construction and using some of the materials we were previously. It also, kind of in an interesting way, is almost easier for our surrounding neighborhood to work with this sort of redevelopment because they already have a feel for what's going on the site. So it's less stressful to the neighbors. Some of the expectations are already in place for this type of use. So we want to make sure mostly that the code doesn't get in the way. And then when we can smooth things out to the extent possible, we do that here. So we have updated landscaping regulations. Do you want to take this one? Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, we're going to interrupt the flow here. And that's mainly because the landscape section is one of the places where staff is doing the work in-house, and then we're going to send it to Elizabeth to make it fit into the larger code project. But Stephanie Ashman, who's our senior planner for landscape and conservation, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, she's been leading that work. But if our existing landscape regulations are one of those standalone documents from one of my first slides. So the idea is if we bring it into the code, we can really talk about how does it relate to all the other things that are in the code, parking lot design, building setbacks, and so forth. And we're really going to try to change the focus. The landscaping section's going to be, as the name would imply, about landscaping. So it's about the types of plants, how many plants, where the plants go. Our current landscape regulations, if you ever read it, it kind of reads like a site planning document, and it touches on things that have actually nothing to do with landscaping. Someone just decided to put them in there. Like there's provisions on retaining walls and the placement of lighting and trails. So getting it back to being a landscape section, and then we use the larger code to inform site design. But some things have happened. The city did an urban forestry master plan recently, and there were some recommendations on the type of trees that we get with new development, and when those need to be preserved and when they could be mitigated. And then also there's new limitations from the state of Colorado on non-functional turf. So bringing that into our landscape requirements. And then that last bullet is sort of what I was saying, keep the landscaping material here. And then our current landscape regulation, there's a lot of stuff about maintenance and stuff, but that's really not a code provision. It's more of a best practice thing. So actually making like a separate landscape manual that's like, okay, I've installed this landscape, now what do I do with it? So taking that actually out of the code to make things simpler. So those are some of the things we're looking at there.
Yeah.
What happened here?
So, following landscaping, we have a fairly compact section on fences, walls, and screening. So just basics from the current standards carried forward and updated, encouraging screening where it's appropriate. I don't think not a lot of expansion on this, just clarification. Let's go to the next one. Parking and loading standards. So we have spent some time going back and forth about the parking and loading standards, and I think Andrew expressed this really well, and so we kind of have kept this as our guiding theme. We want to have the city move away from excessive surface parking with reasonable exceptions. So we're trying to right-size parking, and if any of you spent any time trying to right-size parking, it is more of an art than a science. Parking has some very murky origins. And so we're trying to learn from what we know and also understand how parking impacts redevelopment and infill development, either positively or negatively, right? So we want to be able to have people open and maintain businesses in the city. And sometimes that requires more parking, and sometimes it actually requires less parking because you can't get it where you're trying to put it. So we're trying to get that balance in. So we've reviewed and updated the current parking ratios based on best practices. So sometimes those best practices come from the Institute for Transportation Engineering, and sometimes they come from us calling other Front Range communities, saying, what are you doing for industrial and how's that working for you? So more anecdotal and on-the-ground approach to it. We've added a process to allow applicants to submit a parking study to reduce the parking that's required. So staff let us know that there are far more requests for parking reductions than for parking expansions. And so we wanted to create a process for that rather than sending someone through variance, because if we do parking reductions through a practice like that, we can do a parking study for the site, and we can understand what types of parking the use will likely generate. We have added maximum parking standards. And so maximums come in usually when you're seeing a large commercial user who wants to put in more parking, like a Walmart or a Target or a Home Depot. They want parking for some of their biggest holiday shopping, and then it goes unused over time. And so we set the maximum in there as a percentage over the parking that's allowed, but there's a process in there to waive it. It's not a hard maximum, for sure. It is a stopping point. Come in and talk to the city, tell us what you're up to. Let's figure out if we need to soften it up with additional landscaping. And let's talk about, how this has longer term impacts in the community. We've incorporated standards for shared parking, and adjustments for shared parking, adjustments for transit proximity. So if you are truly on a transit line, no wishful thinking here, you can reduce parking. And we have put in standards for bike parking. So if you have additional bike parking, you can do some parking reductions. And then for the bike parking requirements, we have short and long-term bike parking standards. The goal there is to make sure bicycle infrastructure is in place so people can use it as a means to commute. Or, so that they know they can safely go from one place to the next and kind of keep the city sort of in that place of, yep, biking is a thing we can do in addition to driving, in addition to walking. Parks and open space. So we've carried forward the city's park typology guidelines. There's that word again. I'm going to stop using that word. So the city has different sizes of parks that do different things. In the current regulations, and we've carried those forward. I'm sorry, I didn't have that on. Thank you, Andrew. There are private park design standards that we've carried forward and private rec facility standards that we've also carried forward. We just want to make sure that these amenities happen as part of development, and so, making sure the regulations are up to date. And this is a topic of design for a topic of conversation for applicants is really important. So we have a new section for outdoor lighting. And so it's a bit of a misnomer. The city did have outdoor lighting standards, but they weren't collected in one place. And one of the things that we like to do when we update regulations is put all of the like standards together so you can see how it works across the board and get the bigger picture. So we identified some purposes for lighting. The city wants to see that lighting serves a purpose, not that everything is lit, every night like we are, landing airplanes here. Lighting should be no brighter than is necessary. It should be used when it's needed. So there could be some places or times when the city says, go ahead and turn it off. And the lighting should be directed to the place where it's needed. So we want to, look at preventing light trespass and making sure that the light is shielded and that it meets the city's review criteria. So you can see in the image that we've got here, what we're trying to do is get away from that regular outdoor lighting that kind of goes off in a variety of directions to get more directed lighting. We can keep people safe. We can keep the community safe. We can light the places where people are and where they want to be. But we can also move away from sort of that trespass or the light that is just going up into the sky and making it harder for people to see what's up in the sky. We are not recommending the city move to fully dark sky regulations, but they'll be more dark sky friendly, more thinking about where does light go and where do we need it. So our next steps, we have one more meeting right after the 4th. And I have the wrong title in here. I apologize for that. We will be doing review procedures, not development review procedures, but we'll just be doing administration review of the code. We're still holding August 12th if we need it, and we'll see how the discussions go. We have been working hard on finishing up the UDC. We're at the level of setbacks, which is completely sexy, lots of numbers about where things belong and why they should be there, making sure that we set the setbacks so we are not creating nonconformities and we are creating opportunities for development. So I think probably by the time we get here in July, we'll have a date. That's my hope, that the draft will be out when you guys can start digging into it and taking a look at it and making sure that what we're telling you and what you're envisioning is also what lines up in the regulations, and if not, we'll have plenty of time to talk about it afterwards. I think that's us.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So that concludes staff's presentation. We do have an activity that we'd like to do with the commission and the audience again, but before we do that, we'd like to provide, if the commission has any questions based on the presentation, questions, things on your mind or clarifications, so we can work through those and then go to the activity.
Quick clarification, how much authority or input will the planning commission have on these final codes?
So we will be back, probably more than once, probably several times. We will be looking to the commission to make a recommendation. It's really as much or as little as the commission chooses to say. We will, of course, share your recommendation with the city council. I guess I'm thinking of the comprehensive plan from a couple years ago. We brought you a comprehensive plan. The commission had some requested amendments, and you all voted on those individually. We presented those to council. They included most of them, and there were a few they didn't, but we will absolutely listen to that and share that with city council.
The city council has the final say.
They would have the
Right.
final say.
Okay. Commissioner Pegg?
Sure. Could you go back to the slide on mixed use and commercial
Oop.
standards?
There it is.
Yeah. So to what extent are we regulating things like architectural character and entrances and that kind of thing?
Do you want?
Yeah, so the architectural character is going to vary site by site, and so that's going to be, the regulations are going to be focused more on looking at bringing things in that work within the community. I don't know, and I think it will depend on the application, and maybe Andrew and Jacob can speak to this, that someone is going to understand from the regulations exactly what it needs to look like. I think that is going to be more of a back and forth discussion with staff. But as you put together all the pieces on the walls and the entrances and the materials, it certainly starts moving development to a place where you still have, 5 or 10 different ways to design it, but okay, my roof design is going to be one of these 6 things. My materials are going to be one of these 10 things. So it limits the world of, bring us anything, and puts them in a starting place to have a discussion with the city staff first, then planning commission and city council about where the application is going to go. So if you look at entrances, that's going to say, entrances need to be facing a public street. They may need to face the primary public street on which the building is located. So we're putting kind of the bumpers in place, but still leaving room for the applicant to design something that's going to work for the owner and work for the site, subject to city review and discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Carpenter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions / comments, but yeah, first I'll just say I like that you're using the picture of Sweets of Inspiration down there at 73rd and Lowell. It's a good bakery there. So
I haven't tried it, but now I've heard it.
yes, go for their breakfast burritos. Get it smothered. So I think the first question I have is we have variances, of course, are contemplated variances from the standards or exceptions from the standards are contemplated in our current ODP and PDP processes. Is the goal here is to reduce the number of variances that are required or exceptions that are required on those documents?
Short answer, yes.
Yeah.
So, Vice Chair Carpenter, I know you've been on the commission for a little while, and you've seen all types and sizes and scales of projects. So, if you remember, up until about 2018, typically our PUD process negotiated standards, and there's some give and take, and we usually, the staff would explain, this happened, and therefore that happened. And then in 2018, when we went to design standards completely from guidelines, it was perhaps an unintended consequence, this idea of having to get an exception, when the whole reason you have planned unit development zoning is things are supposed to be flexible and contoured to the individual needs of a piece of land. So yeah, I think we're going to try to get away from exceptions. I don't know that it will be 100%, but we're trying to. We have. I might let Elizabeth weigh in, but I'm going to try to answer. We're looking at what there's built-in flexibility within the standards, and then there's what kind of latitude can our planning manager have to make less consequential changes at the staff level, and then above that level, are there things that the planning commission maybe could be the body, but we don't take it all the way to city council? That's kind of where we're going, because we're seeing quite a few projects, residential projects with exceptions, and the staff, I was just reading an agenda memo that Jacob wrote. Staff tries to articulate that in the agenda memos, but it doesn't feel like maybe bringing it all the way to city council is the best way to address it, because they're setting policy for the city, they're looking at the strategic plan, and I don't know that they're looking at the number of inches in a setback. So kind of making that division that way. And Elizabeth and I have talked about this. There's of course different ways you could structure the code, when we were working on this a few years ago before we paused it, the direction was something very prescriptive. It was this hard set of rules. The more we've talked about it amongst ourselves and with others, we actually think our negotiated system is appropriate for Westminster. And so I don't think we want the heavy-handed, completely prescription approach, but we want to lay out the standards in the code. And then I think the benefit of the guidelines is saying, the guidelines, which are not necessarily requirements, but it helps the applicants understand this is what we're trying to get to, and maybe they can propose another way to achieve that outcome. So I think we'd like to maintain flexibility and address it through the PUD without all those exceptions and variances. We will keep a variance process because there will be probably something we didn't think of, and there needs to be a relief valve in those situations.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you for that explanation. The two most common exceptions it seems like we've seen recently are entrance islands for subdivisions or developments, and then minor roof pitches. Those both seem to be common exceptions that maybe need to be updated as we're looking at this.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And especially redevelopments probably don't need the entrance islands because they're probably already there if we're doing an infill site anyway. So, anyhow, the other, well, I have several thoughts, but the other main one is the parking area. I like that we're doing more bike parking, but can't wait till I ride my bike to Grease Monkey, get my oil changed. So let's make sure we're reasonable about where we require bike parking and the amounts and everything. The other thing on parking, the chance of us getting many more big box stores or nothing are probably low, but also, going to Home Depot, even though they don't use all those spaces with all those carts and people using giant sheets of plywood and everything else, they need that extra room, or at least some of that extra room for us to maneuver those giant carts and of materials, and the contractors too. So I just want to make sure we're being make sure we're being reasonable and logical about that as well, because it's not just, it would be nice to have maybe a couple more landscape islands. I'm thinking at the one 88th near Wadsworth there, but or Lowe's or whatever, and there may, maybe we won't have another Lowe's or Home Depot built in the city, but sometimes you need those maneuverabilities out there. I think. And then I understand the idea of reducing parking at transit, and I think that might be from the state land use changes as far as getting rid of parking maximums and stuff. Or maybe is that not the gist of that?
The concept may be similar, but we're not looking at going as far as that went.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Because while it may be. While transit lines might be great to get people from here to the central city or to certain areas, even I believe the data shows that people aren't overwhelmingly getting rid of their cars. They still have their cars, and then when they do their local trips or whatever, when they get home from work, they're still using them. So we need to make sure we're accommodating those. And hopefully some of these parking exceptions are also some of what we've seen at the Uplands, where we're using street parking or other creative ways to make these infill sites work. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah, okay. I think just the third bullet on the left here is the parking study, which is one of the options. The prior jurisdiction I worked for, that was probably the most used one, because we didn't have to look at formulas and ratios. The applicants would come in saying, here's these similar projects we've done in similar locations with, similar levels of transit or lack of transit and so forth. And, we'd say, okay, you've got these other projects. We can go out and look at them. Yes, that amount of parking works. So I think, those sort of customized solutions instead of one size fits all probably be what we see the most of.
Okay, perfect. I think that answers, or those are all my questions at the time. Thanks.
Commissioner Tomacek?
Thank you. We've got a couple of things. The first would be to echo two of the things that Commissioner Carpenter brought up. One is with regards to how you're structuring the regulations and the kind of push to reduce the number of exceptions that are coming. There's a certain balance there that I think you need to strike, primarily because if you write those regulations broad enough, you may never have to come to us for approval ever again. And as we've seen on some of the infill sites, the public has a distinct desire to push back against the decisions you're making. And if you write them too broad, they never get that chance.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
We got to be careful about that. The other one was about parking. Just my experience around neighborhoods all over Westminster and other locations, there's more and more return to multi-generational households. People are holding on to their houses much longer. That's part of the reason we have such a shortage on housing, which means those kids that they have when they first move in turn into teenagers who have their own cars. I've got one neighbor who has 3 or 4 kids. Each one of them has a car. Each of the adults have 2 cars apiece. They have a 3-car garage, a 4-wide driveway, and they still have to park 2 cars on the street. I've got another set of neighbors who use their garage for storage. Yeah. Because they're multi-family or multi-generational household, they need to put their stuff someplace. So I would argue against reducing it for the residentials, and to your point, reducing it for the mercantiles, the retails, the industrials, stuff like that, which is usually the invert thinking. There's a whole lot of jurisdictions cutting it for residential, and I think it's going to harm them in the long run. But as you say, that's all best guess. That's magic, I suppose. On the adaptive reuse, the traditional thinking, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, is all we're going to take something that was office, school, you name it, and turn it into residential. And our traditional adaptive reuse was taking something and dropping it down a certain amount as far as the hazard that's associated with it. We'll take a factory and turn it into a food hall, something of that nature. those establishments are well done, and you can pull from all over the state for those. How are you thinking about the potential of taking something that it would increase hazard or increase the change in the reverse direction? And my primary example is the Prost Brewery over in North Glen. That went from a Bed Bath & Beyond and several other retails, and is now essentially a factory. And it's right down in the middle of what would normally be right on the edge of a neighborhood. And I think you'll see more and more of that happening. There's a bit of that going on in Louisville, some of it going on in Boulder, and I worry that we're going to effectively regulate out that ability here in the city.
Yeah, no, that's a valid concern. There was kind of a separate process, and so that's what it says, implement toolkit recommended. There was a toolkit. I never liked that name. I don't know. But, and it was actually other staff in our department, our economic development group led that, but we were lucky because Elizabeth was one of the consultants on that project, so she got to impart their findings, and they interviewed a number of people in Westminster that have tried to do this that hit roadblocks with the city. So that was really a basis for the findings of that. But I generally agree with you. I mean, the sort of the classical approach is there's this building, whatever it was used for, it closes, it maybe becomes an eyesore, and then someone wants to bring it back to do something else with it. Mm-hmm. And then we say, well, you got to do this code and this code and this code and this code. And, the dollars add up and they get frustrated. And, some of the experienced, well-financed people navigate all that and they make it work. Others walk away. And we don't want people to walk away. So it's a balance. I think for the Unified Development Code with our zoning and site planning stuff, we're going to be looking at the exterior appearance and how it interacts with uses around it. And it might be, cases I'm thinking of are the one image on the screen, everything around it's probably also not up to current codes. Mm-hmm. So Elizabeth has introduced to us, but it still needs some work, this sort of concept of a sliding scale of thresholds where you would start to apply newer code requirements instead of everything all at once. But I will also say, depending on what the change in use is, absolutely our building code, fire code, plumbing code, those things will be looked at. And, if there's potentially hazardous things, they're going to take a look at it and make sure the right safety things are there, whether it's, fire suppression or ways to mitigate fumes and odors and that kind of thing. Yeah. So this is our future as the city runs out of land, which, I said we're less than 500 acres away from running out of raw land. We're going to be looking at existing buildings and what are the right uses for those and how do they support the community. So we're going to have to figure this out. Absolutely.
Okay.
May I ask a follow-up question on that?
Oh,
yeah.
So I hear you saying that it is important to be able to allow the creation of the brewery or something along those lines, that we don't want to inadvertently back this into a corner that says it's either residential or it's not happening at all.
Or even just the mentality that it will be something less onerous than it was previously.
Okay, fair. Okay.
It's typical for large buildings to get turned into a church or a meeting hall or something of that nature, whereas that same large building could get turned into a go-kart racing center or some other such thing. And don't laugh. The Toyota dealership at 36 and I-25, exactly that. And it's right in a backs right up to neighborhoods. Our current rules might not necessarily permit something like that. And I'd like to see that get continued or reinforced in the new codes. On the lighting topic, I'd like to see that, if we can, merged with the sign code as best we can. I live over off 104th and Federal. And when I moved in 93, that was a fairly dark corner. There was only one shopping center there and the car dealerships around it. Now it might as well be downtown New York. And most of that lighting has nothing to do with the street lights or the parking lights. It has to do with all the signage. And I'd rather not wake up. I'd rather not more people wake up and have to look at Safeway or McDonald's or some other place across the way because they won't turn their freaking lights off when they close the building at night.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that it gets a little tricky over there because so much of those properties are outside the city.
Oh, I'm not saying you should have taken care of that.
That particular one gets it's like 4 cities all come together in half a mile.
But it's one thing to say, well, Walmart, you have to put down lights on your parking lot, and that take care of one thing. But when they've got a 36-foot long sign that's 7.5 feet tall and says Walmart right in your bedroom window, that can bother some people.
We know how to find our sign expert. We'll have a conversation.
And then the last one's just a more of a comment. I'm a big fan of that one weird building that you guys say that you're trying to keep out of the city. For the life of me, that new little development that's over by the bowling center, I don't like the way that little place is laid out. I love the fact that it's completely different than everything around it. The one weird building thing to me gets you the bank building that's at Wadsworth and Alameda. It gets you Casa Bonita. It gets you all these really iconic buildings in places that you don't expect them to be. I would love to see more buildings like Los Arcos over off of, what is that, 72nd and Sheridan thereabouts. Under current regs, I'm not sure something like that gets built in the city.
Your one weird building is better looking than my one weird building is, but that makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah, I think maybe you were thinking of just something that was a sort of a one-off, not necessarily an iconic building.
Yeah, mine wasn't
just,
iconic. It wasn't fun.
Yeah,
So-
but you're right. We've tried to maintain the possibility of iconic buildings. And if y'all were on the planning commission when Matt Cummins was the planning manager, I know he always had this expression that I'm probably going to get wrong, but it's like, well, if they've got really kick-ass architecture, sure, we'll find a way to make it happen. And that's kind of where we are, because Westminster has a certain character with the brick and the landscape setbacks and so forth, but we've worked on creative buildings like Digital Globe up on 120th or something, Circle Point. So yeah, the idea is like, if you give us something really high quality, then yeah, we're going to consider things different than are written in the standards.
Yeah. My tough part with that is who decides what's high quality. Some of those really weird buildings out there that I think are kind of odd, my wife loves.
But depending on where we end up, it might be this commission.
All right, thank you much.
Commissioner Pegg?
Yeah, I want to agree with Commissioner Tomacek on regulating aesthetics there, though for a reason you wouldn't expect. Like I said last time, one of my favorite things is Tennyson between 38th and 46th. And what the architecture there reflects is the way that tastes have changed over, half a century, maybe even a whole century there. And if our regulations are too stringent, we're essentially saying, no, tastes can't change. And we are regulating out those charming places in the future, and that would be a bummer. And the second thing I wanted to bring up was parking. I'm actually in favor of parking reform. Parking is a subsidy to driving. We require minimum amounts of parking, and then we wonder why we have bad traffic. And as for concerns about like businesses having enough area for loading docks or whatever, they know their needs. And I expect that developers will respond appropriately to the needs of their customers. So I'm really skeptical that we actually get anything from requiring minimum parking requirements. Just as an example, my house has a one-car garage and a one-car driveway, but current Westminster code does not allow that. I like my house. I'm not willing to pay for extra space in my driveway or extra garage space. And I think that's fine.
I'd like to echo the two commissioners that commented on the lighting standards that you're trying to move towards, and also the comment about making commercial and retail follow some of these lighting standards, because they are some of the biggest problems. The church signs and the auto dealer signs are actually a distraction for drivers and are kind of dangerous in many ways. So I would emphasize or echo my support of reining in some of that overdone lighting. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, if there's no more questions, we would like to do the activity and then let everyone leave close to 8. We told the guard a certain time. So we do have an activity that probably will generate some additional comments on some of the things we've been talking about. So thinking about the things we've talked about in general terms, of course, tonight, pedestrian connections, site design, parking, transitions, compatibility, garage location, or even if there's a garage, refuse collection, landscaping, so forth. We'd like to do a little, I'm not sure how this is going to go, so let's just have some fun with it and hope for the best. Two sort of hypothetical exercises where we look at two pieces of land, and we'd like to hear from the commission and the audience in the room. What are the things that are most important of all, the types of things we've talked about, without going through every one of them, but, what do you think are the 1-2 really important things with the sites that I'm going to show you? And so I'm going to start with a residential example. And this is the north-south street shown there on the left is Sims. The street cutting through the middle is Countryside Drive. I think Vice Chair Carpenter lives out this way somewhere. And then I put some images on the right. You'll see the upper image is looking from Sims east into the property, and then the lower image is looking from Countryside Drive north into the property. So it's a residential property, so we're not talking about use. The use has been decided through the comp plan, but what are the really important things here? And why is the text that was on this slide not showing? Another question. I think it's on the other. It's on the backup version. Okay, I'm not going to work with that. But again, thinking about, is it access? Is it the type of product that's here? There's residential all around it. Is it the trails? I remember Vice Chair Carpenter at one point mentioning that there needs to be some sort of better off-street connection to get to Westy Hills open space, which is just there on the lower left of the image. Is it parking? Again, it's going to be residential use, so we know it's going to be residential use. But what does the commission think are the right types of things we need to make sure in the code for a quality project, for a compatible project at this location? An audience, speak up as you wish. Karen, if you want to go first.
Make sure the trees are kept. That's my first.
Do you want to use the, it's a little hard to hear. You want to use the, yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing all these sites where the bulldozers are deciding how things lay out, and there's beautiful trees and beautiful features on some of these sites. And I'm a landscape architect. And when I went to school and in many other projects, we had to do a site analysis where good views, existing features, all that stuff had to be mapped out before we ever put, a hypothetical structure on the site. And I don't think anything like that is being done right now. They just they take the site and it's as if there's nothing there except for flat dirt. I mean, I listen to the uplands, and you know what my feeling of the uplands is. But last night they were talking about a parcel where they were actually keeping views. But they're building in B1 these structures that, they have magnificent views to the west. And where are all these units facing? They're facing the water tower or the apartments, and they don't even take advantage of the views. And it's like, you're losing money, plus you're making a kind of crappy product. So when I see a site like this, I would say, first of all, map out the existing trees, map out good features, and then design around those things with whatever. But I really think that the city should require an existing site map, that talks about views, talks about existing features, talks about that, and makes the applicant show how they're respecting that.
Okay, that's helpful. Do you all have any input? Please come up.
Do I need to give my name or follow any sort of
No, this
procedure?
isn't a public
Awesome.
hearing, so just.
So I live in this general neighborhood.
Oh, great.
So I'm stoked. It's fun. And I know north on Sims, there's some cool shops. You have to go over the hill, which is an awesome bike ride. And to the south is the open space. So there's lots of cool things I could get to on my bike. But on that one stretch of Sims that you see there, there's no bike infrastructure. There's a Sharrow to the north, and there's a lane to the south. But for that one stretch, you're contending with cars. So that makes both of those effectively useless to me, because for that one stretch, I'm scared, and I know that a driver was killed on Sims a few years ago. So it would limit my access to those cool things coming out of my neighborhood. So I'd say connectivity.
Okay. And commissioners, any things you think would be really important for someone trying to do a residential project here?
Things that you would like to see preserved from the current site, or just things that we'd like to see incorporated into the site?
More of the second one, but really, what are the types of things that you all want to make sure we have code provisions for to get a quality project, quality residential project at this location? What are those? What are the things that give us the right? We don't expect this to be exhaustive, but what are those 1 or 2, 3 things that really need to be thought about here? Before a site gets fully planned out for future building.
Well, my first comment would be pedestrian right-of-way to connect to the open space, because there's probably not enough room in this. It's the triangular site we're looking at, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
There's probably not enough room to put a big park in there. So residents would want to have easy access to the open space. I don't know if that would be an underpass or a dedicated bike lane or something like that, because they're not going to have enough recreation in this smaller site. They might have a pocket park, which would be good, but so I would say pedestrian connections to the surrounding open spaces.
Yeah, and if it helps, we think, if this helps the thinking at all, we think the site could take 12, maybe 14 homes. It's a little bit limiting, so it's not going to be this giant project, but if they were developing homes, or if I guess someone wanted to do big custom homes, there'd be less, larger lots. But again, what are the things that are important here, or could be important here?
Vice Chair Carpenter.
Oh, sure. Well, knowing this site, knowing the challenges of this site, there's a giant gas easement that runs along that fence line, the northeasterly line of that. And so the challenge is you're not able to put any buffer between what is perceived as a higher density development there and the existing single family. So there's going to be some political issues just with that, because you can't pile, you wouldn't be able to put a 6-foot berm on top of that gas line. That would just be cost prohibitive. So that makes it, that kind of makes it a little difficult. Agree with the connectivity comments. You know, I think I've said from here multiple times that Sims north of 108th doesn't have connection to the Walnut Creek Trail system or anything up until you get up to until you cross that creek. And I walk my dog on Sims, and I've seen old ladies walk their dog there on Sims, and I can dodge a car. They probably can't. Well, I don't know, some probably could, but I wouldn't want to risk it. But I agree with that northeasterly entrance to the open space. That would be great if there was a crosswalk there and connectivity in there. That would definitely be an amenity. You know, have a crosswalk from Countryside to, I think that's 105th across the street there, and then, you know, and then a tie-in for an entrance, because there is no walk connectivity there. But I think those are some of the major challenges. The other thing is those are Countryside and Sims both have no parking. There's no, so it's not like you could just do a traditional development and have houses fronting those roads, because those are not, that's not the right classification. So we would have, you know, it would take something pretty it's just a challenging site, and
probably no one's developed it.
Yeah, that's probably right. And I know we had well, I think the city had a concept review that did not go well with that site a couple years ago. I don't know if that's still in process or not, but it's been, I think originally it was actually a zone commercial, or it's a commercial property, and got reconfigured.
Long time ago. Yeah.
When it was originally platted, it was anticipated to be
Convenience
commercial.
store site. Yeah.
Yeah, it was originally on the plat. It shows as a convenience store site, because I'm in that filing, and it's or a commercial site, I should say. So I think that's another reason, that because otherwise it would have been developed out, you know, 50 or 45 years ago.
That's Countryside, yeah.
So, but some way to keep the set, or just so it's not entirely, you don't want traffic right behind those fences of those existing neighbors. I think that's really what's going to be the major issue, is how do we build some sort of interesting circulation, and maybe it is an alley loaded product, but also keeps the traffic away from that back fence, because I think that's going to be the political issue there. And and otherwise, the connectivity and the infrastructure around for walking and biking and things that people who live in an area do.
Okay. Oh, look at that. All I had to do was keep clicking? Okay. Okay, well, those are the things I wanted you to think about.
I think I would add to those.
Oh, sure.
The safety aspects of that corner. Sim Street, because of the development that's going to be going on up near the airport, is going to become a major thoroughfare. The idea of a traffic, at least a set of stop signs, if not a full set of traffic lights in that area, if not right there, is going to be necessary, especially if you put two entrances into a dozen homes or whatever goes into that corner. Otherwise, people will never be able to get in and out, at least on the Sim Street side. And Countryside Drive will be nearly impossible to turn left or right out of over time. I'm thinking 15 years down the road, because I've seen some of the development plans for the airport property, and a lot of that stuff, well, for the new Sim Street extension, is going to put a lot of business up there, and people are not going to go all the way up to Broomfield and come back around. They're going to go through these neighborhoods. That raises also the issue for fire truck access, police department visitations, all that sort of stuff in that same area.
So we also have a commercial example, very different type of property. This is on Sheridan, just north of 78th, as you can see. This is a through lot, or two lots actually, looks and feels like one lot, but it's 2 lots that go from Sheridan all the way through to Zenobia to the east, north of 78. This site used to have a Pizza Hut, if you remember that. It burned down, I don't know, 4 years ago, lost track. But so as you can see from the street view now, the upper image is looking from the backside on Zenobia looking west towards Sheridan, and then the lower image is there looking on Sheridan east over to Zenobia. It's a close to flat, but not quite perfectly flat, slight slope north to south. But again, what are those? This would be a commercial example. So the comprehensive plan has designated commercial area. But what would be, again, what are those critical designations? And I'll invite the audience if there's comments there. Is it the way? Is it our lot standards in terms of how we create lots, or do we want to encourage combining the lots? Is it the street treatments? Is it the pedestrian bike infrastructure? Do those need to be added? Is it the landscape? Is this a place we'd want to see a building close to the street, or do we want to see the building set back with parking? Where do you put refuse and loading? There's houses fronting on that east side of Zenobia, so thinking of the compatibility considerations. Again, it's I'm not trying to tell you what should be. Just I'm giving some ideas, but I'd welcome any thoughts from the commission or from the audience. Karen, if you want to come up again. Yeah.
If we're talking about reducing parking standards, have standards that reduce parking, just looking at this space, what happens is there's this and this and this and distinct. And for instance, if there were some incentive to share parking with the neighbor so that, you don't have to have empty lots just with your space, but you can have shared parking that would reduce the amount of parking and also makes it like an integrated space instead of this and this and that. And it would look more like a community, even if it's a commercial space, because you're sharing a flow of activity.
That makes sense.
That's actually a point I was going to make is this area in particular, but there's other spots around the city and across the whole north area where it's exactly this thing, that every commercial property has to have 2 entrances, or it's at least got to have a loop drive, and et cetera, et cetera. The size of the lots originally make it almost impossible to put a good sized restaurant on, or a good sized convenience store, or whatever it happens to be, simply because there's no circulation capability. You'll end up with nothing but blacktop in a small building. For adaptive reuse, I don't know that there's a lot available here that anybody would be interested in as a single lot. But if you were to clear that, give it the ability to have integrated parking lots, an alley, so to speak, that drives between all the lots, would make it a lot more usable to folks. I think the businesses would do a little bit better if people weren't having to constantly dive in and dive out, especially on Sheridan.
Any other thoughts?
Commissioner Pegg?
I'm going to bring up bike access. You are a quarter mile from Little Dry Creek Trail there. So bike and pedestrian access is actually pretty viable. Mm-hmm. For example, it's not shown in your picture here, but there's those condos on the northwest corner of 76th and Sheridan. Mm-hmm. They could walk there if that were improved. Maybe.
Yeah, there's a nice trail around Lake Arbor over there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean it's a little far to walk, say, from Lake Arbor to I don't know, let's pretend it's an ice cream store, you know. It's a little far to walk from Lake Arbor, but if you live close by and with the right pedestrian access, people might be disinclined to drive. And it wouldn't hurt if there was not excessive parking on the space.
You've got a lot of people from those homes that could walk to your ice cream store.
Yeah, you've got a bunch of houses just to the east.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying this has to be an ice cream store, but yeah,
When are you going to open?
there is a lot, there's
Or needs a little man.
a good-sized walk shed there. If there were pedestrian access, now I'm really looking, there's apartments across Sheridan as well. That section of Sheridan is a bummer to cross.
Yeah, this is, I think that's the Burger Haven place across the street there.
Right.
Was that,
Yep.
what's that called? Jim's Burger Haven? Yeah. If the commission will indulge me, I guess I want to ask a specific question, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm gonna put this out there. You know, staff, we've kind of been struggling with this idea of the city's mostly suburban, and there's little pockets of urban, and we need to have standards that fit both, really. Is this the kind of place that the commission would see maybe a building close to Sheridan with a pedestrian orientation and parking on that backside? Or would this be a place you think it would be better to have a more suburban format where the building is set back with parking in front and then, just loading or whatever on the Zenobia side? I'm not saying either is right or wrong. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I have a feeling the neighborhood would want the building pushed out on the Sheridan.
I don't know, if it was a full-service restaurant, I think it would work really well to have have it back into the larger lot. But, yeah, it's a tough site, so.
You know, I was just looking at that building that's east of the Grease Monkey. What is that building? Do you know?
It's the white building? Next to
No, it's to the right of the Grease Monkey, and it's Grease Monkey's not labeled on here. I'm looking at an
Yeah,
aerial.
I think
Grease Monkey's right on the corner, the northeast corner of Sheridan and 78th. It just looks like a residential commercial. It looks like a commercial structure
it's some
that's
kind
got
of-
an architecture that's very residential looking.
I would say, I think
Like a house converted?
it's an office, but yeah, I think it may have been a house. I'm gonna see.
So if you look at it from Street View on Zenobia, they have a lot of trees on that east side that buffers that houses. I mean, that's a pretty significant buffer, and I think those people would like to have that continued. So even if there was a parking lot there, if you had a large enough buffer with a half wall or something that you can't see the cars parked there, you could just continue that and put another one of those buildings, you know. I could show you on a piece of paper if I could.
Yeah,
figure it out.
I
You follow
thought maybe
what
on my
saying?
phone I could figure out what that, but even then, I don't think it has a sign.
But it's got
yeah.
handicap parking. It looks like a dentist office.
I would
or
say my best
something.
guess would be some sort of medical office.
Yeah, so
That's-
if you did another building just north of that and then continued the parking east of there, as long as you had a buffer against that residential, but now you have too long of a driveway that doesn't meet public code lengthwise, so you'd either have to, turn it to the west into Sheridan, but that would probably be a right in, right out, or extend traffic onto Zenobia, which the residents aren't going to like that. So I think whatever you did, if you continued the buffer that's existing on that unit, if you look at it from a street view, it's really significant, the landscaping. Like when I take my little guy and stand it on there,
Yeah.
I'm amazed at how dense that landscaping is. And if you continue that, I think that the neighbors would be okay with it, yeah.
It's almost as if when that was originally built, they either kept all the cottonwoods that are along Zenobia or they planted them.
Right.
No, these are just regular trees. It's like ornamentals, and there's a couple of evergreens too. Anyway, that just seems like it needs to be a continuation. So that would be my input, to look at what's surrounding and what people have been okay with for however many years, and then you continue it. So that would be the kind of thing I would think. That's a that's a really tough spot.
Sure. Yeah, I like that. I do too. Although, as far as building placement, which was your question, I think, looking north and south, it looks like all the buildings are kind of set back from Sheridan. So if we're trying to a consistent street front, that might be the idea is we want to have something kind of in line with that. Although, seeing that the old Pizza Hut's still on that aerial, it was actually kind of shoved into that southwest corner there, pretty close. As long as, I don't think it matters. I mean, it would be nice if we were close to Sheridan, had a nice little entrance or whatever, but as long as either with the access is going to be the issue, making sure you can get in either from Zenobia or from Sheridan and the adjacent properties. I think that's going to be the key. But yeah, there could be a high quality architecture that's kind of closer to Sheridan, or we keep it in line there just to kind of continue that pad site form that's there. I guess I know personally I would choose that, but I don't own the land, so it's going to be kind of up to the developer to figure out what he wants.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and I think that's kind of our general thinking, is that it's context, and here one thing makes sense, but a mile up the road it may be something totally different.
And definitely for redevelopment and infill, I don't think anybody on the commission here is disagreeing. Yeah. It's going to take some interesting development to get some of this stuff.
Do our other two audience members have any thoughts? This is kind of our last thing, and we're going to conclude for the evening. So,
If you want her 2 cents.
I like the comment about maybe consolidating parking and then having more opportunity for other things. There seemed to be a big focus in the presentation you gave about having a sense of place, and how cool for all these teenagers living in this community to the east to have a Dairy Queen and a Mexican restaurant, and what was the other one? Mexican restaurant, Dairy Queen, donuts. This is like a date night hotspot. They could have a really cute area to exist if it weren't all blacktop.
yeah.
So yes on less parking.
She makes a good point. There's a lot of wasted area here that's not being utilized, and it's
Yeah.
just a mishmash. Like, if it could be consolidated,
This
it would be good.
is yeah.
Actually, it looks like one or two of the properties are nothing but parking.
Yes, exactly.
There's an empty lot up there, too.
There's a lot just north of it that looks completely empty.
And this is Sheridan, obviously, but we certainly have similar conditions on stretches of Federal from really from about 96th south all the way to our southern. We have this type of thing, and sometimes we see proposals. Some of them advance to become projects, some of them don't. Karen, you want to add in something?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, yeah, if they only had to have one entrance in instead of in and out, because they could use maybe the adjoining. But that comes also with the idea of, there used to be the island median requirement for developments. And when I was working, one of the reasons was because if one side of the entry, the paved entry, was not being able to be used, you could use the other one just like another entrance. And that was one of the main reasons that median kind of entrance was incorporated many, many years ago, with the idea that it becomes an alternate form of access. And now there's just a road, and if there's road work, that access point is completely cut off. But if we could use the idea of medians in a place like this as in and out, and then incorporate with the next neighbor to free up that space, because it's almost disconcerting to see all these in and out things along the road, when, I mean, that's what the business parks do. They have long areas where there's not a lot of in and out, and that makes it more relaxing for the eye. Or just from a traffic perspective, if you know that somebody's not going to come in and come out within that short distance, that's even safer.
And friendlier to cyclists and pedestrians too, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for indulging me. That was really helpful. And I took some notes. I think Elizabeth took a lot of notes. So we will process all this. Our session again next month will be focused on procedures, and screen went weird. And then depending on both our own progress, but any questions or things we hear from you, we can look if an August session is needed, but we'd like to really maintain some momentum here and get this thing finished this year. So every chance we get to visit with you is very helpful to us. So thank you for your time tonight.
And thank you for
joining us. Karen, I don't know your names, but thank you for joining us.
And thank you for your great presentation. That was appreciated. Is there any more comments or questions from the commission?
I actually had one more.
Okay.
In the landscaping stuff that you guys are developing, have you started including wildland urban interface stuff into that?
Yes and no. Technically, Westminster doesn't really have the true interface, but we have had conversations with the fire department, and they've introduced some concepts that we're making sure we're speaking to there.
Okay, I'm just thinking of the very western portions that are out by Stanley Lake, the very western parts out where Commissioner Carpenter lives, and the very northern sections.
Absolutely.
Those are not forest fire lands, they're grassland, wildland hazards, much like the Marshall Fire.
Yeah, our open space division, since that's all city open space property, that they have, after the Marshall Fire, there were robust conversations on, what needs to be thinned back and what may be okay, and, can we pull from these canals if we need to, and all those kind of things. So absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, we got to be mindful of things like that.
The state is finishing up a model wildfire resiliency code that will be, I think it'll be generally applicable. Most of it is building code related, but there is some landscaping stuff in there. We'll probably have to make sure we're just in alignment with that.
That's typically the approach, and the problem is that we keep telling people to harden their houses, and fire still finds a way to get into them. And 9 times out of 10, it's the landscaping that foils the building construction.
Yeah. During the Marshall Fire, I think there was also a lot of issues with the fences spreading the fires.
Right, and that was for the emergency response aspects of it. It's a lot of getting in the way. The fences, of course, caught fire, which was a problem in and of itself. But it kept emergency responders from doing wide area suppression operations, because there's 6-foot fences everywhere. You just couldn't get around.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of lessons learned in there about fence layouts, property conditions, all sorts of other things. We tend to focus on the buildings and the vegetation, but there's a bunch of other stuff in there that's worthwhile too.
We also have to understand that it's determined that transmission lines went down. And the more we depend on, I would like to see the building codes talk about building with solar, or that we're creating our own energy rather than having transmission lines bring it in. Because the transmission lines going down is the big problem with this. And as long as we're depending on like Excel and fossil fuel to create electricity, rather than having our buildings themselves create the power, which is possible, but we're not incorporating that in our building codes, where the buildings themselves are creating the electricity rather than having transmission lines bring it in. I mean, that's the big part of the problem with fires, is the transmission lines.
Yes to everything I heard from everyone. So, but thank you all. This is very, very helpful to us. This has been continues to be a long, challenging process, but you know, we don't want to have a bunch of staff, technocrats sitting in a room making decisions. We really need to hear, you know, these additional points of view. So we really appreciate your time tonight.
All right, thank you. The meeting is hereby adjourned at 8:05.